You have been lied to about debt your entire life. Not about everything. Some debt is genuinely dangerous. But while you were told debt was shameful, something to avoid, pay off, and never talk about, the wealthiest people in America were doing something completely different. They were using debt as a weapon, and the gap between people who understand that and people who don't is one of the largest financial gaps in the entire country. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how it works, and more importantly, how you can start doing the same thing. The story most people are told about debt goes like this. Debt is bad. Debt is a trap. Pay it off as fast as you can. Live below your means. Save everything. Never borrow. And for consumer debt, that advice is completely correct. Credit cards maxed out on vacations. Car loans on vehicles that lose value the second you drive off the lot. Payday loans. That kind of debt makes you poorer. But there is a second kind of debt, one that almost nobody talks about in personal finance. It is called leverage, and every major fortune in modern history has been built with it. Here is the core idea. If you can borrow money at 5% and deploy it into something that returns 10, 15, or 20%, you have just made money on money that was never yours to begin with. That is not debt. That is an engine. And the wealthy figured this out a long time ago. John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan. None of them built their empires from savings alone. They borrowed, strategically, repeatedly, and they used borrowed money to acquire assets that made them more than the loans ever cost. The difference between them and everyone else was not income. It was how they thought about debt. There are three primary ways wealthy people use debt to build wealth. All three are legal, available to almost anyone, and almost never taught in school. Method 1. Real estate leverage. This is the most widely used form of wealth-building debt in America. Here is how it works. You buy a $300,000 rental property with $60,000 down. A bank lends you the remaining $240,000. Now you own a $300,000 asset with only $60,000 of your own money. Your tenant pays rent. That rent covers your mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. And anything left over is cash flow. But here is the part most people miss. While your tenant pays your mortgage, the property is appreciating. If that property increases in value by just 5% a year, that is $15,000. On a $60,000 investment, that is a 25% return. You did not earn 5%. You earned 25% because you used leverage. This is why real estate has created more millionaires than almost any other asset class in American history. Not because properties magically go up, but because leverage amplifies every percentage point of gain. Method 2. The buy, borrow, die strategy. This one is used almost exclusively by the ultra-wealthy. And once you understand it, you will never look at taxes the same way again. Here is the problem wealthy people face. They hold assets, stocks, real estate, businesses that have gone up massively in value. But if they sell those assets to access the money, they owe capital gains tax, sometimes 20% or more, so they do not sell. Instead, they go to a bank and borrow against those assets. A loan is not income. It is never taxed. So a billionaire with $100 million in stock can borrow $10 million against it, spend that money, and pay zero income tax. They use the loan to fund their lifestyle. The assets keep appreciating, and when they die, their heirs inherit the assets at the new market value, erasing the original capital gains entirely. Buy the asset, borrow against it, die with it still held. That is the strategy, and it is completely legal. Method 3. Business credit lines as fuel. Every serious business uses credit lines, not because they cannot afford to operate, but because using credit strategically lets them preserve cash for opportunities, while using borrowed money for operations. A business generating $500,000 a year in revenue that uses a $100,000 credit line to fund inventory during peak season, then pays it off, is not in debt trouble. It is using cheap capital to generate more expensive returns. This is why business credit is treated completely differently than personal credit. Business owners see credit as a tool. Most individuals are never taught to see it that way at all. So what does this look like for a regular person? Here is the framework. Step 1. Know the difference between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt costs you money and buys you nothing that appreciates. Car loans, credit card balances, personal loans for vacations. Avoid these. Good debt puts borrowed money into something that returns more than it costs. Real estate, business investment, education that demonstrably increases your income. These are tools. The question to ask about every debt: is this going to make me more money than it costs me? If yes, that is leverage. If no, that is a trap. Step 2. Build your credit intentionally. Your credit score is not just a number, it is your cost of borrowing. Someone with an 800 credit score borrowing $300,000 for a rental property pays dramatically less in interest than someone with a 650 score. Over a 30-year mortgage, that difference can exceed $100,000. Every point on your credit score has a dollar value. Treat it like the asset it is. Step 3. Only borrow when the return beats the cost. The wealthy do not borrow recklessly. They borrow precisely. If a loan costs 7% and the investment returns 12%, they borrow. If a loan costs 7% and the return is uncertain, they wait. Leverage amplifies gains, but it also amplifies losses. The discipline is in knowing which situation you are in. Before you sign anything, here is the part most of these conversations leave out. Leverage is not magic. It is a multiplier, and multipliers work in both directions. The 2008 financial crisis was a leverage crisis. Millions of people borrowed to buy homes they assumed would keep appreciating when prices dropped. The leverage that was supposed to make them wealthy instead wiped them out completely. The wealthy survive downturns because they hold cash reserves, diversify across asset classes, and never borrow more than their assets can absorb if prices drop 30%. So before you borrow a single dollar to invest, make sure your emergency fund is solid, your consumer debt is gone, and you have genuinely stress-tested the downside. Leverage used correctly is the most powerful wealth-building tool available to ordinary people. Leverage used carelessly is how ordinary people lose everything. The wealthy do not avoid debt. They have just learned to use a completely different kind. While most people spend their lives trying to get out of debt, the wealthy are strategically getting into it. Into real estate, into business, into assets that grow, while borrowed money does the heavy lifting. The gap between those two groups is not talent. It is not luck. It is not even income. It is information. And now you have it.